This is Fox Chicago News at 9.
Occupy Chicago protesters have a message for Mayor Emanuel. Remember 1968. The protesters are trying to set up camp on a more permanent basis in Grant Park. An online petition is on its way to the mayor. It asks him to put a stop to mass arrests of protesters at Grant Park. Nearly 200 protesters were arrested last weekend after they refused to leave the park after its 11 p.m. closing time. The petition included the line, "Don't let this end like 1968," a reference to the riots that broke out during the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Fox Chicago's Tisha Lewis joins us now with more on the story. Tisha.
Well, Bob, it's an all too familiar backdrop behind me. Occupy Chicago's daily General Assembly meeting. They have it every single night at 7 p.m. The issue is that Grant Park closes at 11 p.m. and anyone here, protester or not, a minute after is breaking the law. So what do the protesters do? Occupy Chicago is hoping to change that ordinance, at least temporarily. Occupy Chicago is determined to move its home base from LaSalle and Jackson to Michigan and Congress and set up a permanent community in Grant Park. Nearly 10,000 people, including many of the protesters themselves, have signed this online petition.
If you're not hurting anyone, then you should be able to say it and get your point across.
They're asking Mayor Rahm Emanuel to stop the mass arrests in Grant Park, respect their right to peacefully assemble, and allow them to have a base for their protests. In conclusion, it says, don't end like 1968. Jackie Spreadberry is a biochemistry and chemistry student at the University of Chicago. What is so bad about protesting during the day and then going home and then coming back the next morning?
Well, because then we're not truly occupying the area. I mean, we want our presence here 24/7 until we see change happen.
Freedom of speech shouldn't have a curfew.
I would compare this to asking to go to a party and mom and dad let you go, but they make you come back at 11 because that's your curfew. You can't show up at 2 in the morning and say, you know, it's not fair, the party was really good and I wanted to stay longer. The curfew was set there for a reason.
And attorney Daliah Saper says she doubts the city will make an exception and points out the 11 p.m. ordinance in place at Grant Park existed before the Occupy Chicago protests. Saper specializes in First Amendment issues.
But there has to be a legitimate time and a place and a manner for those statements. And that's what the city's really done here is they've allowed the occupiers or the protesters to assemble. They've allowed them to protest. They're just saying that you have to go home at a certain time and come back tomorrow.
Several of the protesters here tonight are the same protesters who were arrested in the mass arrest of Grant Park on Saturday. What happens next? Well, we were listening in on this General Assembly meeting. They are planning something called Occupy City Hall for next week, in which they're planning to take, again, their gripe to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Now, the sign-on petition, it's by signon.org. We're told this is some type of affiliate of moveon.org. Occupy Chicago wants to be clear, while they do support the petition, the online movement is completely separate because they insist they are an apolitical organization. Bob, back to you.
Tisha Lewis downtown tonight. Thanks.